So welcome everybody to this afternoon's webinar called Making It Work, Ag Ed in the Classroom. This is one in a number of webinars being offered through New Hampshire Farm to School and the New Hampshire School and Youth Garden Network. So my name is Stacy Purslow. I coordinate New Hampshire Farm to School and facilitate the New Hampshire School and Youth Garden Network. Wow, people keep dropping off here. If we could ask you to just introduce yourself and your interest in listening to this afternoon's webinar, that would be great. Christine, let's start with you.
Okay, I'm Christine Parshall. I'm in Cheshire County. I work for UNH Extension doing community nutrition education with the Nutrition Connections program.
Welcome. Matea, is that how to pronounce it? Matea Lund?
That is, yeah. Hi, sorry, I don't have a camera today. But I am an AgCorps member, so it's a new branch of AmeriCorps with the Montana Department of Agriculture. And I found this webinar series just through one of the many farm to school newsletters that I've started to follow. And in my position, I am helping to promote anything ag related in my community, especially school gardens. And we currently don't have an ag ed program in this county. So just joining to get some information on how people have made that work.
Great, thank you. AgCorps, I got to learn more about that.
Me too.
I hadn't heard of that one. Food Corps, but not AgCorps. And Lisa, who is no camera or mic, so Lisa Morin with Belknap County Conservation District. So she's doing some farm to school work up in the Belknap County Lakes region area. Oh gosh, hopefully we'll have that other person come back on. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy, who is a 6th grade science teacher in the New Ipswich School District, part of Messinic School District, and Mike, who is the program coordinator for New Hampshire Ag in the Classroom and former teacher.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacy. I am going to just share the screen. So we do have a presentation that kind of goes along with our conversation, but we anticipate that it's going to be more conversational than anything. So you should all be able to see.
Can everybody see this? Good.
Yeah.
Look at that. Kicking butt already, Amy.
Perfect. So our emails, just in case you want to get in touch with us after the conversation. But I'm Amy Robbins. I'm the 6th grade science teacher at Boynton Middle School.
I'm Mike Smith, former high school science teacher in the same district. And for full disclosure, Amy and I are neighbors and been working together for quite some time.
Yeah, he's skipping ahead a little bit.
I know, that's why I left it kind of wide open.
Why am I not able to?
Oh, you're not able to advance?
Here we go. Here we go. We had an icebreaker, but I think with so few people, we don't necessarily need to go through that. But the background and the idea behind my icebreaker with my 6th grade students get pretty excited when we do WIPs, more of a formative assessment. I'll ask them to kind of share one word about the work that we had done for the day, or some of the concepts that we might be going over. And they get really excited to beat the time from their last WIP around the room. So they're usually fully engaged and are excited to participate. But it gives me an idea in terms of like what they're actually grasping. But we're not going to do this icebreaker. Just like I said, there's so few people here. And this is where Mike kind of jumped in ahead. So Mike and I had worked together at the high school. I was a paraprofessional. Mike was a science teacher, so I was able to work in his classroom. We were class advisors for the class of 2011. We are neighbors, but we had both, science background. We both had the opportunity to be active on some NGSS committees. I was with a different district at the time. and Mike was here with the Messinic district. And I think just for context, Mike and I have worked together where Mike was the lead, and I was the support. And now it's sort of shifted a little bit with this new endeavor, trying to incorporate some ag work in my 6th grade classroom where I really need to take the lead, but I've been really leaning on Mike to be that support and to help kind of bridge the gap between what I know and what resources might be out there for our work.
I agree.
So when, and Mike might jump in because he probably has a different perspective to share, but when we sat down and decided that we were going to try to make a connection and really work on what standards and curriculum I had, I was terrified. Like, how am I going to tackle this work without it being another thing? I already kind of had my curriculum going and I wanted to flow with my current expectations. I don't have a lot of resources in terms of having a greenhouse. There wasn't there wasn't something already set up for me to adopt or inherit. So and I'm not even in a science lab. If you notice, we're in a science classroom. So there's a lot of limitations that I have being in 6th grade. Once the kiddos get up to 7th grade, they do have a science lab. There is a nice greenhouse that's not being fully utilized, but it's in between the 7th and 8th grade science labs that are there. And then I obviously had that worry about how students would respond.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, I'm relatively new to my position here at New Hampshire Ag in the Classroom. When I was going through the hiring process and it appeared that I was going to be the candidate and stuff like that, you know, over dinner, I think probably we were just talking back and forth, and Amy was like, well, what do you got for me? Like, what can you do to help enhance what I need to do in my classroom? And there are a couple of places, I think, you know, in your curriculum where you felt that like you didn't have like maybe the best lesson plans or whatever the case may be. And you know, the ones that stick out in my mind that were brought up were like chemistry, ecology, photosynthesis, and engineering for that STEM component. And you know, right off the top of my head, the one that seemed to hit the most was to start dabbling in hydroponics, because that would touch on a little bit of all of those. And you know, I was getting new with our curriculum and going through it, and had sat in on a presentation by UNH Cooperative Extension, Jonathan Ebba, who's fantastic. And so I knew that we had stuff that would work for Amy. But I also think as I was getting excited about what we could do and what we could offer her, she knowing her limitations and what kind of expectations in the classroom were, she was getting a little nervous.
Yeah, I was terrified.
I think I said, I think at one point I turned to you and said, you know, you're going to be the garden lady. And I don't think that was not a hat at the moment that Amy wanted to wear. I think, you know, nervous about implementing something new at the school, nervous about not being a gardener yourself, and then kind of not knowing what the outcome would be or the amount of work that it might take was just overwhelming at the time.
Yeah.
And we know, you know, one of the things I definitely feel is probably a drawback for most teachers when they hear about ag opportunities is I can't afford to do more work. As a former science teacher, like, you can't handle more. You already have enough going on and stuff like that. And I think over time, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think over time we recognize that there's a way, yeah, it is a little more, but it also gives you a little, maybe even a lot more connections further on down the line that you can tie into the rest of your curriculum and stuff like that.
Yeah, so in being terrified, I was also pretty open-minded and willing to dive in, knowing that I had a bit of a safety net, just in terms of kind of understanding I had curriculum that I could fall back on if it didn't work, and if it didn't work, I would know, you know, better for next time. So at the start of the year, right on day 2, we tackled just a simple tabletop hydroponic system. My plan with that was, at the very least, figure out how kids are following instructions, kiddos that I didn't really know necessarily, give them something engaging to do instead of just going through a syllabus and telling them all the things that we would cover. Why not just cover it right there and actually have an experience? So we planted some simple hydroponic systems with not any background, right? So we just figured we'd see what would happen. And I also told the kiddos that these might not work. Like, we might see that
It's science.
it's, yeah. And that's always it. I think it surprises sixth graders in their history of science. Up until that point, they're usually doing some pretty prescriptive labs, and so
Where the answer's already known, actually.
yeah. So that was really, it was fun for me to see how students were reacting. I think I learned a lot more about my students with something just very simple. We also took results and we graphed right off the bat. They were able to look at the graph and understand line graphs they don't usually, but they said, oh yeah, like, I know on day 5, like, I didn't have anything up until, it was day 6 or 7 before I started to see a sprout, and they could see that graph and see that data right there. And they really fully understood it.
The bane of high school science teachers, pie graphs. We want line graphs.
Yeah, they all want to do bar graphs and pie graphs. So once we were rolling, we feel very blessed to have a local farm in town that was willing to host us. So we
Willing
took,
and desperate. I mean, they've definitely wanted in.
Yeah.
They want to connect with the community as well.
yeah, so we took our 6th graders just across town. One of the pictures here is they were able to help catch some of the chickens, and I think, as far as engagement, that was probably some of the best days of their lives so far. They were so excited and they really had a lot of fun, and they didn't realize that they were learning as much as they were. But because we had a little bit of a background, some of the information that they were hearing at some of the stations, they connected to in a way that I was pretty impressed with. But then getting further along, so we planted again once our simple systems kind of petered out. We planted again midway for Q1. And at that point, the students had a better understanding. We could kind of take on some notes as far as what plants need. We were able to get some grow lights sent to us from somebody that needed to use up some grant money. But we also graphed the plant growth for those particular systems. And again, I really think students were excited to see their plant growth. Students that I had previously had some challenges getting engaged with their work, they dove right in once we started planting again, and they were able to produce some really nice graphs. I wish I had one to show you, but I don't have those with me right now. But
They all took them home because they were all A's and put them on their
they're
refrigerator.
on all of the
They're all on the
students'
fridge.
refrigerators. Yes. But where we're going next, so we are going to use hydroponics. We're going to continue that conversation, and we're going to work through putting together a raft system once we get back from February vacation, which is next week. We're going to use those systems to really talk about and monitor pH. So right now we're working through some chemistry stuff. So we've mentioned pH as far as it being a chemical property, but they don't fully understand it. So I'm excited for them to have something right in front of them, something a little bit more hands-on, to really understand and look at pH. And then we do have garden beds here that I've adopted. So we'll plant some plantings and potentially offer some summer work for students that want to come up, and we'll hopefully we're aiming to have a salsa garden to be able to give students an opportunity to do sort of a culminating activity at the end of the year.
Yeah, and that culminating activity, we've already brought on our family consumer science teacher up at the high school who's willing to do this. This is something that she and I have done at the high school before. There aren't going to be any tomatoes ready coming out of the salsa garden, but the idea is to get this started now, and the sixth graders coming in next year will reap the bounty of what the sixth graders this year put in the salsa garden this spring. And so it will end up being continuous. They will be able to make that connection between the stuff that they've done and the stuff that it's led to. That is one of the hardest things I think about ag in schools, is that, when we're talking about growing plants, that the prime growing is in the summer when they're out. But, if you get creative, there's ways to make that work for certain kids and things like that, and to provide, a starting point for the very next year. Like, you won't have to start necessarily with hydroponics on day one. You can go straight to the garden on day one if that makes more sense.
Right. And we are all our 5 through 8 is housed in this school. So the 7th graders next year, which would have been my current 6th graders, they'll know we're a small enough school that they'll be paying attention, and they know what's up. So just kind of an overview of our biggest takeaways. Taking time for observations and daily upkeep. The data that is being generated by doing some of this ag stuff in the classroom it's proving to be really rich as far as students being engaged and them being able to really apply some real world stuff, and that their understanding of it is more than what I would have expected.
Well, it's not fake data either. It's data that they actually see, they record, they identify with, as opposed to, again, some other type of data that might not be they might not be generating.
Yeah. And the concerns I had about resources and not really having stuff here already, I'm actually at a point where I'm a little bit overwhelmed because we applied for a grant, and we were awarded that. And so I have a lot of money to spend, but now I'm like, oh, I was thinking I didn't have it. So what do I do? So the resources are definitely there. And I know Mike mentioned Jonathan Ebba. He had, in one of our first conversations, I had reached out to him just to kind of troubleshoot some of the hydroponic stuff. And he had said, which I really agreed with, was that it's not usually the funding that's the problem. It's usually the teacher's willingness to incorporate it into their curriculum and be able to connect it. And so I had kind of overcome that hurdle. But the hands-on learning has been really, really valuable. Planting on day one will probably be my goal, right, in subsequent years, because students were really excited about it, and you can apply it in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, we were able to get worked out that with some of the connections that I have through UNH, we were able to hook up with a grant for hydroponics. And so we ended up with a whole bunch of lights that we weren't anticipating, some growing medium, and some fertilizer and stuff that will go with the hydroponics unit. Things that we were anticipating we were going to have to purchase. The plan coming forward is to create a hydroponics bench that will, I don't want to say be permanent, but will be a dedicated space that will allow for year-round growing of hydroponic plants with the supplies stored underneath. And so kind of an all-inclusive work area for hydroponics that will be unique to the 6th grade, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and definitely something that would have previously kind of felt more like an obstacle, because I'm, in a classroom, I have carpets on my floor. I have, I don't want things to necessarily get messy, because I don't really want to have that conversation with facilities, but making a little bit of a mess has certainly been worth it.
I always like making a mess, but that's me.
So just different lessons and resources. We linked these to our presentation so that way folks could have resources. I'm gonna be using the RAF system, which is down at the bottom. Had I known about the mini tray microgreens, that might have been what I did on day
Yeah.
2, just because you have a quick turnaround, so only a couple days.
We did that in one of our family and consumer science. It's like super quick hit, super easy. Don't need a lot of background in order to do it. And you know, I'll say this from my horticulture background: kids get excited when they see sprouts. Period.
Yep.
End of story.
Yeah. And then the link is the hydroponics link is the first more simple system that we had done, and we've circled back to we talked about photosynthesis, so that was the experience of having plants growing was obviously pretty pretty important when it came to actually going through that lesson, and it was pretty helpful.
The mini tray microgreens, Amy's in the works of writing up some curriculum based around a video that Jonathan Emma put up. He's super stoked to actually have that lesson being drawn up, so that's pretty cool. Pretty cool connection.
Yeah, and that will be on the curriculum matrix
Eventually, yes.
when I get around to it.
When we get, but yes, you.
So not to just like kind of like dump a bunch of information and talk about us and what we're doing, but I just wonder if anyone has any questions or comments even.
Should we take it off?
Are you able to make the curriculum you're developing available? Is it a shareable thing or?
Yeah, I mean, are you talking specific to the microgreen tray or?
Yeah, or whatever.
My goal, I mean, honestly, like a bigger picture goal is to rate the lessons up, and then like kind of hand them off to Mike and have him upload them to is it the National Ag in the Classroom?
Yeah,
Curriculum Matrix?
So through Ag in the Classroom, again, we're New Hampshire Ag in the Classroom, but there's also a National Ag in the Classroom, and that National Ag in the Classroom contains host would probably be the appropriate word. What they call the curriculum matrix, which is a whole bunch of lessons, somewhere in the excess of 800 lessons, I believe, related to ag topics and things like that. If you go to the national, you can go to the New Hampshire site, but I think the national site's easier to navigate. And you type in curriculum matrix, you will get to a place where you can go into the search bar and type in whatever you want. If you typed in, well, once we have the microgreen lesson on there, if you typed in microgreens, it would pop right up and it would give you like everything that you would need to be able to do that. And again, like I said, the national chapter hosts the website. All of the lessons that are on there are absolutely free for the taking. People should go on there. They should grab them and adapt them to whatever they need to do. Use all of it, use part of it, whatever the case may be. There's one on pig power, talking about using pig manure in order to generate methane that can be used to burn as natural gas or to make electricity. And I'm using that lesson, which, pigs, not that we don't have pigs in New Hampshire, but it's not like one of our major commodities. I'm going to be using that to do a presentation in Washington to a bunch of 4-H teenagers and stuff like that. So like, it's right there. You can just grab it and go. Elementary school teachers, like if you're not a science elementary school teacher, there are some great things to do. So that's completely available. And like I said, under National Ag in the Classroom. So that's NAITC. You type that in and you pull it right up.
Yeah, there's a wealth of resources there, as far as lesson plannings, even some videos, those sorts of things. But it's pretty user friendly too.
And they want you to take it. And they want you to grab it and run with it. That's what it's there for.
I'm gonna try to get the link and put it in the chat, but it's slowly loading.
Okay.
I have a very general
Question? Yeah.
Yeah, very general question, kind of going back to the beginning here. I think you were saying when you started this project, Amy, you weren't sure how it was going to tie into the curriculum needs that you had for your sixth graders. I visit a lot of schools, and sometimes I hear people talking about ideas and things. And as a visitor and not knowing that much about ag in the classroom, I never know how to help connect people and really make things happen. So I was just wondering how did you make space in your school day or your school week
That's
to do something when you weren't really sure how it was going to fit and get approved by all the powers who need to approve things?
Yeah. One slide that I didn't show you because I didn't want to bore anybody, but the very last slide in our presentation, and I can share it out to you, is the standards that I try to make sure I circle back to. And I ground, I'm going to share the screen again. I try to ground all my lessons in, whoop, hold on. Here, sharing.
You've gone beyond our technical expertise. I think also part of that, while she's working on that, it certainly didn't hurt that I understand the background of the administrations of the buildings, having been a teacher in the district for quite some time. I don't know. It would have been odd probably for somebody that was in administration to have a problem with Amy working with me. Like they know what I'm capable of. They knew what my job was. So it certainly didn't hurt when, the people would see me coming into the building to work with her on certain things and try to get her up and running. But I mean, administrations can be one of the biggest hurdles, because if you're going to do something that's outside of the box, it's usually pretty visible. And sometimes, I don't want to say straying, but going in a different direction than what they're accustomed to, and surprising them can, catch people off guard. But I think one of the biggest things that I've ever noticed in any of the stuff that I do in my classroom is you can't argue with student engagement. If your students are engaged and the principal walks in, like, it almost doesn't matter what you're doing. The kids are engaged in whatever lesson it is that you're doing, and that makes it viable. And so, I think from what Amy's already said, her kids have been more engaged than she's ever had them engaged before. And so that's huge. And then, I think if the question then comes up, okay, great, you're out in the raised beds. How does this pertain to what you're teaching in class? If you can then circle back to the standards that you've identified that are there, it actually becomes a very easy sell at that point. But it does sometimes come with some caveats that, you're going to get those questions right off the bat.
Yeah. And I think, so I did tie, this conversation just to sort of to show that there are standards there that connect to a lot of this stuff. And I always said, I previous to my science teacher position, I was a special ed case manager and I was co-teaching in a lot of science classrooms. But when it became my role and I was the one that had to decide what unit to start with and what to go to next, I really tried to make sure to circle back to the standards, but then I kept scratching my head saying, well, I could teach it this way, or I could teach it that way, or I could teach it any way in between, and the kiddos are still going to get what they needed. So that was actually really helpful for me in terms of saying, well, geez, you know what, you're terrified to dive into something new. But you could teach it this way, or you could teach it that way. And if it's something different, that's okay. And then so once I really got rolling, and like Mike said, once the kids were engaged, it sort of helped, get that snowball rolling downhill, and we really gained some traction.
Yeah. And that day that, Amy, the first day really, when we sat down and started talking, and we did this pseudo officially, it was out on my back porch, but we were sitting, we had the binder open and all of this. Okay, what do you need and things like that. And then I said, you know, you're going to be the garden lady, and she kind of got up and got ready to leave at that point. I think you know, so buy-in on her end was even questioned at that point. But I think, you know, as it all, you know, the dust settled and you start looking at the connections, and then you look back at the standards, like it all makes sense. And in many ways, it's one of the better ways to I'm going to use a whatever, like it roots itself in there, and you know, it provides this great template that you can bounce a whole pile of things off of.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Yeah. I really found it to be really beneficial in that way.
So people really can reach out to New Hampshire Ag in the Classroom and say, I'm not sure where I want to go with this, but I've got some ideas or whatever. And between the resources that you have and their knowledge of the standards and preferences in their own district, you can help people get over that hurdle of thinking, I can't do this.
Yeah, I mean, not very visible from our presentation, because there's no way for it for us to express it really exactly. Like, it was a slow start. Like, we got started in June and things are rolling along pretty good, but it wasn't like we've been building momentum kind of along the way. And, you know, an idea would come up, the field trip idea. Well, yeah, let me see what we can do. You know, I ended up doing one of the presentations, but like, we've been finding again, you know, we at first it's like, well, how are we going to fund this? You know, we don't get a lot of money in this district for supplies and things like that. I suggested we try the grant. Amy, we sat down and we looked at the grant. Amy invested some on like some of the stuff that meant the most to her. I looked at some of the stuff that I could help on, and we kind of collectively put that grant together, and lo and behold, we got it, you know. And so I look at my job in New Hampshire Ag in the Classroom is to look at the situation for the teacher and just try to figure out what the best method is to try to meet their needs as best they can, whether it be find them a Jonathan Ebba, find them someone in their area that has some expertise that can be their mentor, or whatever the case may be. We have a pretty robust like Maple program that we've you know, is kind of coming into its time frame right now, and in some cases it's a matter of a school wants to get involved, and you try to hook them up with whoever's like local that might be like the best sounding board for them and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I look at my job as like trying to be the liaison to help teachers and whatever it is they need in ag. It's not I'm not trying to make them do the ag that I have or know. It's like, what do you want in ag, and how can we help you? What can we do for you?
Yeah, I think that was one of the reasons why I was open-minded to doing this webinar and being here, you know, not because I'm an expert, but because I'm trying it. And if I can be a resource for anybody, then I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I mean, as a statewide program, it's like, you know, I see the challenges of implementing this stuff in classrooms without, you know, a mic or something. So, and Mike can't do everything. So I don't know if there's any other ways to go about providing teacher support. Because I mean, I know, you know, you and Amy have been friends a long time. You know the school district. I mean, there's a lot there that if you were to work at another school and a teacher that you don't know, so it might be more of a challenge.
We are, you know, one of the benefits of Ag in the Classroom linking up with UNH is there's a fairly robust in 4-H. There's a fairly robust volunteer coordination, and the hope is that sometime down the line is to have these 4-H volunteers be also Ag in the Classroom volunteers. And so, you know, we have 4-H in every county in New Hampshire, and so it would cover a lot of ground potentially.
Yeah, that sounds a little bit like Matea's Ag Corps or
Yeah.
Food Corps position.
Sounds a lot
Um,
like it,
Yeah,
which is awesome.
yeah, that would be great. And I don't know.
What's interesting too, like every state with ag in the classroom's a little bit different. The state of Georgia mandates that across all grades, there's ag ed. And the idea being that having a educated citizenry is their best way to have educated community. And so, that would be great. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So we go about it in a different way here in New Hampshire.
Yeah, we have we're less of an ag state than Georgia for sure. And I don't know, Christine, I know with Nutrition Connections, educators go in the classroom and provide the education, so it's a little bit different model, I guess.
Right, and I know that when we try to pass it off as a train the trainer kind of thing, it's a little bit challenging. It's just so much easier for them to know that if they can make a little space in their day for us, that they're off the hook for just a little bit there. But like I said, because I'm in the schools and every now and then something comes up that's more ag related, and I can be a better ambassador if I understand more what's available.
That is
Yeah,
true.
that's great. So Amy, what's now you're thinking about, the rest of this school year and then talking about next school year that you're going to start again, maybe out in the garden, do some more hydroponics.
Yeah, Amy.
Is that like enough, or you have like some other ideas?
I'm not entirely sure yet. I'm very careful.
I have ideas.
Yes, and we have
Yes.
very different personalities, which I think is why we work well together. But I'm very careful not to overwhelm myself. So my goal this year was just to figure out what works and what might not work. And to really understand that, know that I'm not married into anything that I jump into, but that it's an opportunity. And things have worked out really well so far. So I do want to be able to utilize the garden beds because they are already here. I like to be able to offer a summer opportunity because I live right down the road. And I know some of those kiddos need something to do. So to make that a little bit more engaging, I think is important to me. And that doesn't even necessarily need to be tied directly to my classroom curriculum. We have a couple blocks during the day where I could do some extension activities. And that was the other opportunity, I think, to say like, well, maybe if it's not working in the classroom curriculum, you have to have something to offer for your WIN block or your Boynton block. Maybe that would be a time to carve it out, but I haven't had to go to that backup plan yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I've approached her a couple with some ideas and they haven't necessarily married well with what she's intending in the classroom, but they end up on back burner might be the wrong thing, but they're like kind of in your pocket ideas for those WIN blocks.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of around school gardens. There's a lot of different models about how to go about having a school garden, whether it's, is it an after school program? Is there some sort of summer program and, maybe kids pay to participate and there's a paid coordinator. So there are different ways that they can be incorporated into the school day, after school or summer.
Yeah, and there are our administration is always looking for teachers willing to give a little bit of their time during the summer.
Teachers are looking, I mean, the administration's looking for people to give their free time.
Not free time. It's
Hard to
it's paid opportunities, but just some different programming or or consistent programming if it works well.
Yeah, we had I think it was last year as part of the webinar series. I think it was Dunbarton Elementary that was on to talk about their model for their garden program. So
Yeah.
kids have to pay to participate. It's an after school program for whatever it was, like, 6 weeks at the end of the school year, 6 weeks at the beginning of the school year, and they have a, a stipended coordinator position, and so that was kind of interesting.
Road Nashua does some stuff like that as well.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions folks have? So in your presentation, there were links to some things. So if you send those to me, we can send them out when we do a follow-up email to everybody, if you
Perfect.
can.
Sure.
And I guess we can end a little early if nobody has any other questions. So thanks for coming. We do have a few more webinars coming up, including one that Mike is going to be on again with the family and consumer science teacher he mentioned earlier to talk about the salsa project, I guess. So that's coming up on March 5th. And then we have March 12th, School Garden Seasonality and Cornucopia Project based in the Conval School District will be leading that one. And then we have a master gardener who's based in Merrimack County, going to talk about square foot gardening with kids on March 19th.
Beauty.
So we'll look forward to seeing some of you then, we hope. But otherwise, look for the recording on the New Hampshire Farm to School website. And we will be sending out a lot of the resources that we talked about today to everybody that registered.
Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us.